Chairman. Dr. Hall, Commissioner Hall, always good to see you. Always good to start the month off with Commissioner Hall. I do want to talk about why the U.S. economy has not recovered and some of the steps we could take to bring the economy back. I'd like to actually offer as an example the state where Mr. Brady lives and where I live, Texas, is a good example of the direction where we should head. The unemployment rate in Texas is 8.1%, certainly below the national average, certainly much higher than we would like it to be in the state of Texas. But nevertheless, the Texas economy has performed better than any other state because of why? A job-friendly regulatory regime, no state income taxes, and the fact that Texas is a right-to-work state. As of March, annual job growth in Texas was 3.6%, compared with U.S. job rate growth of 2%. The Dallas Fed says that the unemployment rate in Texas would be even lower, except for the fact that Texas has had a rapid population increase in the last 10 years, of which we're all aware. We also accounted for 14% of the United States employment growth over the last year. The agreeable weather in Texas, better job conditions are attracting people from all over the country, and people are voting with their feet and moving to the Lone Star State. Over 200,000 jobs were created in the last year. Other states could achieve this growth by duplicating Texas's job-friendly environment. And in spite of these statistics, our economy in Texas is not perfect. We are concerned about unemployment rates for young people just getting out of beginning their earning years. Unemployment rates for minorities are unacceptably high, and the overall unemployment rate is still, as I said, over 8%, and that is high for Texas. But the statistics cited earlier demonstrate that compared to the rest of the country, something in Texas is working, and perhaps Washington and other states could consider a more job-friendly regulatory regime in order to restore those jobs that Mr. Cummings says we need in order to recover the economy. And one sector of the economy on which I'd like to focus is the housing market. Housing prices have continued to drop and demand for homes remains low. The housing market, which helps drive our economy, is an area that can create job growth and will be needed to boost our recovery. I'd like for Dr. Hall today to discuss the housing market's drag on the economy and how that affects our national growth. Another area of concern, already mentioned by other people on this dais, is high commodity prices. Consumers across the country face higher oil and food prices. If we don't want the economic revival to stall, these prices have to come down. The good news yesterday is that oil prices did come under $100 a barrel for the first time in a long time. In fact, it was rather a significant drop. Now, what happened yesterday? Oh, the House passed a bill, and here we are in the Senate today, and I would just mention to the Senate that our bill yesterday to expedite lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico, those very leases that have been delayed or canceled by the administration in the past year, the fact that we were willing to expedite those lease sales had a profound effect on those people who like to speculate and hedge in the oil market. They saw that the Republican House was serious about addressing the issue of the supply of our oil produced within our shores. The administration has harmed offshore exploration in the past year. I don't think there's any question about that, and we've seen the effect by the price at the pump. What will not create jobs is the debt, and the federal debt at $14.3 trillion. The number's grown so large that most people just simply cannot comprehend it and have given up even trying. Canada's debt, to put it in perspective, is about $500 billion, half a trillion dollars. The federal government must find ways to operate like a normal family. We all hear about cuts that need to be made, and one of the first things we probably need to do is cut up the government credit card and stop spending. The talk in Washington recently has been about cutting spending, and there are cuts that need to be made, but there are other things we could be doing here in Congress to cut down on government expenses, which are things like waste, which in turn free up resources for Congress to reduce the deficit and help those Americans who are out of work. Let me just comment briefly, and I'll submit the rest of my comments for the record. But Mr. Cummings mentioned H.R. 1214 that passed in the House yesterday. This indeed was a bill that would take back $100 million, I believe erroneously included as a forward appropriation, a blank check, if you will, a blank post-dated check that was included in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is riddled with this type of policy where the federal government has written blank checks, post-dated them, put them in the law, and all of them are overdrawing the American account. Yes, this was a relatively small sum of money, $100 million, but here's the deal. This money was for the construction of clinics. The money, it said in statute, the money could not be used to hire a doctor or a nurse or anyone else to provide care in that clinic. Well, that's crazy. American people recognize that that's crazy. Even the administration recognized that it was crazy because this is the only one of the so-called cut bills in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act where the administration has refused to issue a veto threat as a statement of administration policy. Even the president was embarrassed by slipping this $100 million into the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. I assume it was done over here in the Senate for some reason as a payoff to someone. I can't identify who or how or why, but that's the way most of these things work. But it was appropriate to bring this money back. We're not against school-based clinics. We're against the funding of a clinic with no provision for funding for staffing that clinic. The normal federal qualified health center statute says, we won't build it, you build it, we'll help you staff it. This legislation had turned things on its head, and it was appropriate to reverse that course. I thank the chairman for his indulgence, and I'll yield back the balance of my time and submit the balance of my statement for the record.
Thank you very much. Dr. Keith Hall is the Commissioner of Labor Statistics for the U.S. Department of Labor. The BLS is an independent national